The day I found the Uirapuru was the day I understood that some things in the Amazon don't exist to be understood, they exist to be heard. My name is Mara, and I was 26 years old, working as a forest guide in the hills of Serra do Divisor, the day the most respected elder I had ever known packed his bag and left without looking back. I should have been afraid. Instead, I stayed. My father raised me on that stretch of forest. He taught me the names of trees before he taught me numbers, and he taught me that the forest speaks in ways schools don't prepare you for. By the time I was a teenager, I could read the sky by its color, predict rain by the way the light changed on the canopy, and identify more than 60 species of bird by sound alone. I was proud of that. I thought it meant I knew something. It was a Tuesday in late March, the tail end of the wet season, when the heat sits over everything like a lid on a pot. I had gone alone to collect soil samples from a small stream my father used to call the Quiet One, not because it was silent, but because it never raised its voice, even during floods, the kind of place that feels like it's always slightly apart from the rest of the forest. I heard it before I saw it. The sound stopped me the way a hand on the shoulder stops you. It was a song, but calling it a song feels wrong, like calling the forest trees. It was layered, precise, rising and falling in patterns that seemed almost mathematical, like something had composed it rather than felt it. There were notes inside notes, and the forest around it had shifted, not silent, the forest is never silent, but quieter, denser. The other birds had paused, the frogs had paused, even the insects seemed to have taken a breath. I found it on a low branch above the water, small, brown, a round head, a short beak, feathers the color of old wood. Nothing about its body suggested it was capable of what it was doing, but its throat pulsed visibly with each note, a rapid, trembling movement, like something alive was trying to pass through it. I stood there with my sample bags hanging from one hand, and I did not move. I counted 7 minutes. 7 minutes in a forest where nothing sits still. When I finally raised my phone to record it, the song stopped. The bird turned and looked at me, not sideways the way startled birds do, directly. 2 small black eyes, level with mine, holding for a moment that stretched past its actual length. Then it was gone, silent, into the canopy, as if it had never been there at all. I stood at the edge of the quiet stream for a long time after it left. Then I went to find Seu Benedito. Seu Benedito was 73 years old. He had lived in that exact stretch of Serra do Divisor his entire life, through floods and droughts, and the years when the logging trucks came close enough that you could hear them at night. He was not a man who expressed alarm. I had seen him pull a researcher out of a mudslide with one arm and say nothing about it afterward. I had seen him calm a group of panicked workers with a single sentence. He was the stillest person I had ever known. I found him behind his house, repairing a paddle with slow, methodical strokes. I sat down nearby and described what I had seen: the size, the coloring, the stream, the way it had looked at me before disappearing. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he set the paddle down on the ground. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he stood up, walked to the door of his house, and called to his wife in a low voice. I heard her respond. I heard the sound of something being moved inside, a drawer, a cabinet. He reappeared in the doorway carrying a canvas bag, the kind people take when they're going somewhere for a few days. Seu Benedito. I followed him toward the path. Where are you going? Away for a little while. For how long? He stopped walking, turned to face me, and the expression on his face is one I have spent years trying to describe. It wasn't fear. Fear is reactive, uncontrolled. This was something older, The expression of a man who recognizes something he was hoping he would never see and has already made his peace with it. You found a ura puru, he said quietly, near the quiet stream. I didn't know the word. I asked him to repeat it. Ura puru. He looked toward the tree line, the bird that sings what hasn't happened yet. He got in his canoe and paddled away. By midday, 6 families had packed. I don't know how the information spread. I had told no one. But by the time the sun was directly overhead, the village had a different quality of silence. Doors that were usually open were closed. The trail that was always busy with children was empty. An old woman I passed on the path looked at me without speaking, and the look she gave me was not unfriendly. It was the look you give someone who is standing too close to something dangerous without knowing it. The 3 researchers on my team responded the way outsiders always do. They made nervous jokes. They kept working. Paulo, the hydrologist, said something about mass hysteria and forest superstition that I didn't answer, because I didn't have the energy to explain that the things people call superstition are usually just knowledge that doesn't fit into any category outsiders have. But Dona Fatima, the cook who had worked these forests for 15 years and had seen everything, she didn't joke. She moved her hammock into the locked storage shed and latched it from the inside before nightfall. I stayed in my usual hammock, not because I was brave. I want to be honest about that. I stayed because I didn't know what I was supposed to be afraid of, and it felt dishonest to flee from something I couldn't name. That night, the rain came. It drummed on the tarp above me, and I lay awake, listening to the full orchestral mess of a wet season night in Sierra do Divisor. Frogs, insects, the wind moving through the high canopy, distant thunder rolling over the hills. I thought about the bird, about those 7 minutes of music, about the way the forest had gotten quieter around it, as if even the animals that had been listening for predators had decided, briefly, that this was more important. My father used to say the forest is always talking. He meant it practically. The behavior of animals, the quality of light, the smell of the air before rain. I had always translated that into something rational. Data, pattern recognition, the kind of knowing that has a mechanism. Lying in that hammock, I started to wonder if I had been translating too hard. On the 3rd morning, Paulo cut his leg on a submerged root while taking measurements in the stream shallows. The gash was deep, too deep for what we had in the first aid kit. We spent 2 hours moving him to the trail, radioing for assistance, applying pressure while he went pale and quiet in a way that made my hands shake. He was evacuated by afternoon. He recovered fully. But in those 2 hours, I kept thinking about what Sel Benedito had said. The bird that sings what hasn't happened yet. I kept thinking, is this it? Is this what it knew was coming? A man hurt, a team disrupted, the temporary collapse of everything we had built out here for 6 weeks? Or was our doing what frightened people do? Hunting for meaning in coincidence because the alternative is accepting that some things happen without reason. I didn't know. I still don't know. And I have learned that the not knowing is the point. So Benedicto came back 8 days later. He came down the trail in the late afternoon, slow and unhurried, the way he always moved. He set his bag down at the door of his house, walked past me toward the porch. Then he stopped. "The man who was hurt," he said. "He left?" "Yes, he'll be fine." He nodded, slow, as if something had confirmed itself. "What does it mean?" I asked. "The Uirapuru. What does it actually mean when someone sees one?" He sat down on the low stone wall beside the path. He took his time the way he always did, the way people who have been in real danger take their time with words. "My grandfather saw one when he was young," he said, "downriver near the old gardens. The whole village moved that week. My grandfather said for the rest of his life, it wasn't the bird's fault. It didn't bring anything. It just sang what was already coming. He paused. Like a barometer. I told him I knew what a barometer was. The barometer doesn't make the storm, he said. It just knows before you do. I sat with that. So you left because you knew something was coming and you didn't want to watch? I left because there are things I have already seen enough of. He looked at me steadily. You stayed. I didn't know what I was supposed to avoid. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. That's why it appeared to you. The Uirapuru doesn't show itself to the ones who already know. It shows itself to the ones who still have something to learn. That night, I went back to the quiet stream. I don't know what I expected to find. The bird wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. The Uirapuru had already done what it came to do. I stood at the edge of the water in the dark, in the smell of wet soil and green leaves, and the slow mineral breath of the stream that never raises its voice. And I listened. Not for the bird, for everything else. The layered, patient, constant conversation of the forest at night. The things that had been speaking all along in a register I had never learned to tune to. My father was right. The forest is always talking. You just have to stop being the loudest thing in it.